Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebsta.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. Today I have an interesting one for you. So we have Kevin Mulrain, who's currently VP of Mid-Market Sales at Global Web Index. Now, according to Kevin's LinkedIn profile, we don't have any direct sales operations experience, though I have spoken with Kevin before, and he obviously has, as part of his sales leadership and management roles, been exposed and been responsible for sales operations. And this may be a trend you see as we move forward with the podcast, is that we're going to also incorporate sales leaders into these interviews. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Awesome, man. No, this is great. Thank you for having me on.
So first, I want to understand your exposure to sales ops, if that's okay, because as I said, according to LinkedIn, we have these all sales experience from individual contributor up to VP and leadership. Where have you been exposed to sales operations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, a lot of my background is working within high growth startups, and for anyone who's been exposed to that kind of a world, you wear every single hat possible and imaginable. And so for me, that's really kind of how I got more exposed into sales operations. So I was working at a company, and it really was like come in and understand and define our process, understand what's working, understand what's not working, but really start to be able to actually define a process, measure, and optimize for growth. And so, more so I was finding myself getting involved operationally. We did an entire overhaul of Salesforce, our CRM, and I was really the person quarterbacking, that particular project. So really getting into, the weeds of Salesforce, and then also understanding sales process and really how those two things kind of tied together. I was a sales manager at the time, but, no one else was really raising their hand to do it. So I was like, hey, why not? Let's make it happen. So, I was kind of thrown into it, but I think very, very much organically. It's the way I think, it's the way I operate. So it kind of took off, like I said, pretty organically.
And so when you did this Salesforce overhaul, when you were the manager and then you got thrown into being responsible, which business was this?
So this was when I was at Madison Logic.
Got it. Okay. And was that your first real taste of kind of the operation stuff?
Yeah. So, I think, when it came to operations on a wider scale. So as an individual contributor, I was always very process driven. I was always very much trying to understand my math of sales and really understand my conversions. So I think that's kind of where it really started, or where that, seed was planted. But really doing it at a wider scale for an entire org, it really kicked off at Madison Logic.
Got it. Awesome. And then if we fast forward to today, I assume Global Web Index has their own sales operations team, or am I assuming wrong?
We have a sales operations person.
Okay, cool. Sales ops person. And roughly how many people are in the sales function?
So globally, I'd say across account executives and sales development, it's probably about 40 or so individual contributing sales reps. And then on the account management side, there's probably another 15 to 20.
Got it. 15, 20. And then we have the one ops person. And then in terms of the leadership, so you're VP of mid-market. Is there another VP or two other VPs for different segments?
Yeah. So we have VPs on the enterprise part of our business, and then also heads of sales for vertical specialization. So we sell to agencies, brand direct, and also media companies.
Got it. Awesome. And so this one salesperson, are they reporting into you or are they reporting into a different VP?
So they used to. Currently, they report into our chief commercial officer.
Cool. And the CCO is like all of the sales VPs reporting to the CCO?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So salesperson, just writing notes of the VPs. Okay, cool. And then the current tech stack at Global Web Index.
Yeah. So we're using Salesforce as our CRM. We're also using SalesLoft as an enablement tool. On top of that, we're using Zoom Info, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's pretty lean right now, but we still find that there's a tremendous opportunity to kind of even optimize with what we've got.
Got it. Yeah, that is pretty lean. How have you seen, so how do you view the relationship between sales leadership and sales operations? I know it's a very broad question.
No, honestly, I think it's a great question because I think very much historically they've been very, very siloed. Where I actually think that there needs to be either closer alignment or even, I think what we're going to see over the next couple of years are heads of sales are going to be somebody that can wear both hats because of the importance of sales operations. Because I think really what it's doing is it's blending this art and a science, right? The sales operations sides of things, it's really understanding your process. It's understanding what's happening. It's understanding the results that those actions are driving. It's maximizing efficiencies, both from a process perspective, but also within leveraging technology and tools and how all these things integrate. So as a sales leader, that's really, I think, what's been super foundational to just my success is having that understanding. And then for me, it's really being able to kind of point across our process or through our funnel and saying, okay, this is, we're kind of falling off a cliff at this conversion point. Let's try and understand why, what types of trainings can we implement? So I think that they really need to be almost one and the same. But I think the more aligned, the better.
Got it. Blending the art and the science. Okay, cool. So can you share a time when you have been able to make either a rep or a group of reps more productive?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple different instances and there's a couple different ways, but I think one of the most foundational things is just really allowing reps to understand their math of sales, right? A lot of the times I find their reps come in, they don't really have a plan. They're just kind of, I don't want to say they're going through the motions, but they're very reactive to their days. They're not really planning out their quarter, their month, their week, their days. And so where I think I've been able to have a positive impact there is really being able to work on that planning with them and break down, more consumable, more digestible types of approaches to their plan, making sure they've got a plan B, but more importantly, looking at that process and looking at the activity and seeing what type of results it's driving. So if we know that if we can increase, and it may be activity, right? But if we can increase a conversion point by 2%, what kind of an impact does that have on your, yearly achievement to your quota? So really going over, kind of like a math of sales calculator and saying, managing out and just looking at what's the pipeline we need to be driving on a monthly basis and how is that going to help us get to our numbers, based on whatever the sales cycle may be. So it's really getting into like just simplifying the key benchmarks that need to be achieved in order to see a certain result. So I think that has helped reps get better visibility and transparency in terms of what needs to happen on a day-to-day level.
Got it. And I think this is similar to what other people have said about making the sales rep like the CEO of their own business, having them understand and be responsible for their own numbers.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely a big part of it. And one of the things that, we've been really working on over the last few months and really seeing a positive impact this year specifically is Reps taking more accountability and more ownership on creating their plan. On, with the reps one-on-ones, it's not to sit down and ask questions about their pipeline and their deal strategy and closing plans. It's them bringing that to the table. So they're preparing the one-on-ones, right? They're preparing the agenda. They're owning their metrics. They're owning their conversions. And that as well, we've seen not only an impact on efficiencies, but I think overall, it's just giving much closer alignment between rep and management on what needs to happen to see a certain result.
Got it. So when you say agenda, then the rep is responsible for bringing their own agenda to their weekly sales meeting with you.
Exactly. Yeah. They need to take ownership on compiling, the accounts they want to be speaking about, the closing plans on those, pipeline information, everything.
Got it. Have you ever had to try and make a rep do something that maybe he doesn't want to do because it's not within his skill set or directly related to him to getting commission? And if so, how did you do that?
That's a really good question. I think one of the most important things, or the most important jobs of anyone in management or sales leadership, is to ensure your reps are focused on things that drive to a commission, right? There are always going to be things that, reps may do that fall a little bit outside of that. But in my opinion, it really, 80-90% of their time and focus should be solely on what has to happen in order to, hit numbers or overachieve numbers or hit their personal goals and their growth. So I don't want to say I try and steer. I don't really try and push them to do too much outside of trying to hit their own numbers, to be really candid with you. However, there are instances where I may ask somebody to, deliver a training or to, talk through a deal that they closed. And it doesn't really take a lot of convincing someone to do those types of things, because I think, with our hiring process, we hire people that we know are going to be good team players, that we know are going to be super collaborative. It's really embedded in our culture. So I don't think that, because of that, I don't think we have too much, there's not a lot of an effort in trying to convince people to do things that they don't want to do.
Got it. And this is super interesting, the difference between sales ops and sales leadership, right? Because I probably asked that question 50 times, and most hardcore sales ops people are yeah, it's so tough having to get the salespeople to do the stuff that we need them to do.
Yep.
So it's quite interesting that as a more leadership focused sales manager / leader, is kind of relying on hiring to ensure you have team players, but then having them focus almost the majority of their time on hitting their own quota.
And I think to that point, right, it's a really interesting point, because you look at so many different organizations, and every single company I've ever spoken with or worked for, they're always like, our Salesforce instance is a mess, right? And everyone's is a mess. And a lot of it is because of data quality. And a lot of it is because, reps aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. We've sort of overcome that, or we've minimized that based on, again, that one-to-one strategy where the reps are taking accountability and ownership, but more importantly, explaining why, right? Why is it important for them to have an updated, an accurate pipeline? Why is it important for them to understand every single step that they're doing within Salesforce? Why is that important? I think one of the kind of unique vantage points, when I look at a sales process, I look at it through the lens of a sales professional, of a sales rep, right? So I can understand the day-to-day, the steps of what they're actually doing. So when I design these things, I know not to make it too arduous and not to over-engineer it, where you're not going to get that adoption and you're not going to get the data integrity that you need. On the flip side, though, because of the kind of operational mindset I have, I still know how to design it where we're still going to capture the things that we need to capture. So there is that super fine balance of over-engineering it so you can capture every little detail and everything you need, and then not making it, too over-engineered where people are going to look at it and be like, I'm going to be spending my entire life in Salesforce. No way. So it's absolutely a balance, but I think the most important thing is teaching the reps and explaining them why it's important and how they can actually leverage Salesforce or the data to their advantage to sell more.
Got it. Awesome. Moving on to the sales forecasting process, how's that currently working?
That's a really good question. It's a very topical question for our org. Our forecasting approach, at least for my team, we really do run through specific key questions and things that the reps do need to be able to answer in order for us to input something into our forecast. So, right now, like we're very much diving into every single opportunity. We're looking at pipeline. We're looking at specific behaviors. We're also looking at the velocity of email replies and phone calls, right? Because that's a huge indicator for us in terms of the timeliness of something's going to close. So we kind of have a really good process and system of saying, all right, these are things that we need to be able to answer and identify before we can put something into the forecast. To an extent, we've been a little conservative with it, but that's allowed us to be a lot more accurate on the forecasting aspect. That, again, it's leading to not just more accurate forecasts, but also giving better direction to our sales reps as well.
Awesome. So you're basically saying that in order for a rep to add something to the forecast, they have to have done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different sort of sales processes or methodologies you can look at. There's like MEDDIC, MEDDPICC, all that sort of stuff. But we've really sort of identified a series of questions that, we need to make sure we have really firm answers to, and different kind of verifiables from our prospects that we're going to question the sales reps with. And, there's certain things that we're going to need to understand, like procurement process, for instance. That's something that's always throwing people off. And it's something that we try to address earlier on in our sales process to help expedite that. But really just understanding, what are the verifiables that customers have to kind of give us in order to put that into the forecast. And we also really we try and focus on winning what's winnable, right? And that kind of condenses or prioritizes our pipeline, and really focusing on the winnable deals out there and trying to remove a lot of the noise.
Got it. Winning what is winnable. Okay, cool. And then if I said to you, if you could only measure one sales metric for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
That is a crazy question. One sales metric for the rest of my life. I think it would be, this might be kind of a workaround to your question, but I think pipeline velocity is something I'd measure. Now, it is sort of a combination of formula of different metrics, so it's not necessarily just one thing. But I think really what it would be for me is just looking at really the speed at which we get something into the pipeline and how effectively we can move it to close. That to me is a scalable metric when it comes to indicating quality of pipeline and the ability to close. So that's one. And I think if I had to give you a second one, because that's, like I said, it's kind of a combination of different metrics. Customer acquisition cost to me is probably one of the core metrics to from a business perspective, to really validate the efficiency of your team. It's a great indicator of when to scale, when to hire. So to me, if you're looking at really more of like the health of your business, that would probably be the key metric for me.
When you're measuring customer acquisition cost with sales teams, do you look at how much time a rep has spent on a deal and then factor in their salary? Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, so we're pretty much looking at not so much the time spent on deals, but looking at their salary, their overhead, commission costs, of course. We look at our marketing costs. So and again, there's management costs obviously built into that, sales development costs built into that. So as best we can, just to get a holistic picture of when we close a deal, essentially how much money do we make off every single deal? And it's a great indicator for us just to see how well our reps are ramping. So from a timing perspective, we try and shoot to get our sales reps within a certain CAC within a certain time frame.
Got it. So it's a metric you use to all the deals came through. Here's all we spent on getting the deals, and then you can work out per deal how much we spent. Cool. Awesome. And then final question, who has taught you the most about sales ops / sales leadership?
That's a great question, because I think the exciting thing about the world we live in today is like there's just so much exposure to super smart people, amazing content, all of that. Like I said, kind of like my sales ops background, it's been a lot of just like diving in and figuring things out, which has worked out kind of well for me in a way. But I think if I was going to kind of highlight one person that I've just learned a lot from, Peter Kazanji, he's the CEO of Atrium. He also runs Modern Sales Professionals, which is a group of network of salespeople that pretty much just like they put on events, they talk shop. He has a super strong operational background, but he's got product marketing background, entrepreneurial background. He's just a lot of different skill sets there. But I think I mentioned him just because I've learned a lot being a part of the Modern Sales Pros group. I've learned a lot from his content. So I think just the impact he's had on the profession as a whole has been super valued. But I know for me, it's always a go-to resource for me. So that's probably the biggest area of learning for me.
Got it. Shout out to Peter and Modern Sales Pros. Okay, awesome. So here are the things that I picked out. I think you might be forecasting a big trend here in that we used to have like sales leadership, sales ops, but actually to be an effective ops person or leader person, you need characteristics from both areas, like the art and the science, as you said. So I thought that was quite interesting. The productivity or the ultimate like productivity hack for sales is actually getting them to understand and manage their own time and numbers. And then when you do that, you can ensure the reps are focused more on their just commission-based activities. And then if you have to do anything like outside of that, you resolve that by hiring people that you know are going to be team players and so are happy to go and do the training session, etc. So yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for your insights and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man, this was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.